Welcome to the Knowledge Institute Podcast, where we talk with business experts, deconstruct main ideas, and share their insights. I'm Jeff Kavanaugh, head of the Infosys Knowledge Institute, and today we're here with Saurav Agarwal, CEO and co-founder of SIERA.AI. Saurav, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Jeff.
Before we dive into your current work, really a question: what got you started in this whole area of AI and industrial mobility?
That's a great question, Jeff. And I sure wasn't born to work on forklifts for sure, or in heavy industrial vehicles. Um, what got me into this field is as I was wrapping up my PhD at Texas A&M in the year 2017, I was really enthusiastic about building a business, but I didn't really have a clear picture of what kind of business. But I knew that it had to be something in AI, something in robotics, something in my passion area, right? So we actually went and got funding from the National Science Foundation called NSF ICOR, and they gave us a little $50,000 grant to just go to market research. And that was a really fun, interesting experience for me because that was my first time in my PhD getting out of the lab and talking to real world people, getting to understand real world problems. And while I was doing that, there were so many amazing revelations, talking to um, massive companies like Walmart, massive logistics companies like DHL, and learning from them how industrial mobility plays a huge role in everybody's day-to-day lives. If you look at the books on the bookshelf behind you, at some point they were in a warehouse. That means they were moved by some kind of industrial vehicle like a forklift. So it touches everyone, but it's in the background. It's the backbone of the supply chain. That's what got me excited. And then learning from those people how they've got millions of vehicles in their fleets, and they've got hundreds of these warehouses running all the way from Antarctica. They've got warehouses and forklifts in Antarctica, to warehouses in South Africa, to Texas. So it's a global problem. And these businesses, they're spending so much money on people to operate them. There's so many accidents, injuries, so much damages that they're looking for solutions to digitize these fleets, to make these fleets safer and more automated. That's what got me into it.
And making sense of this industrial automation and autonomous navigation is what we'll be exploring today's discussion. What's amazing is we seem to be in this decade of exponential change, and autonomous vehicles and AI, all these things are coming together. As a company, let's start with that. SIERA.AI focuses on industrial mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get a baseline, what does that mean? What does that term actually mean?
So that's a great question, Jeff. To put it in simple language, for a layman, if you look at any kind of industrial vehicle, which is a forklift in a warehouse, or a big truck at a port that moves containers, or a road vehicle that's being used in road construction, like those Caterpillar trucks that you would see on the at night when you're driving down the highway. Those are all industrial vehicles. Basically, these are vehicles that are not used to move people. They're actually used to move goods or do a job. And typically, they're used on off-road operations. So this industrial vehicle market as a whole is poised to double from now to 2027. It's actually going to be an $81 billion industry by 2027. So it's a booming industry, it's a booming market, and it plays a huge role in everything from construction to warehousing to ports to oil and gas, and touches everybody's lives.
Again, digging a little deeper with SIERA.AI,
Mm-hmm.
or Stock Robotics as you're originally known, what is unique and different about what your company's trying to do, your mission, or maybe your value proposition compared to others?
Absolutely. So in the simplest format, we are an AI and robotics company that helps warehouses and manufacturing facilities digitize their forklift fleet and prevent accidents using computer vision and IoT sensors. Our benefit to our customers is to make their operations safer and more efficient.
What's fascinating to me about this is, as a plant rep myself and doing a lot of manufacturing over the years, and then working with the automotive OEMs and seeing autonomous vehicles really take off, and the legal challenges. Once you solve the technical challenges, trying to solve the legal ones.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting aspect of warehousing and inside the company is you don't have to deal with the consumers out on the road. You can control things a little more.
Right.
So what's that environment allowed you to do, and what do you see that's distinct about like automating forklifts and equipment that might be off-road?
Right. So if you look at the autonomous vehicle industry, the car industry, they've got very long timelines. And right now it's in that phase of trough of disillusionment where the expectations were too high and the promises didn't really deliver. It's because the complexity of doing autonomous vehicles on public roads is too challenging. But when you move into a warehouse or a factory, as you rightly said, things are very structured compared to a road. It's not that it's super easy, but we definitely expect, and the broader market consensus is there, that industrial vehicles will tend to get more and more automated and broadly automated much earlier than automobiles on the road. What we are doing in that domain is we first go in and digitize their offline processes from their inspections of the vehicle. And then we add automated safety. So we actually enable the driver to be additionally safe, very similar to what you now see in cars, level 2, level 3 automated driver assistance. We add that in. And then taking a very similar approach to Tesla, that system learns from how the human drives, how the operations work, and then makes the self-driving system more intelligent.
I've had the pleasure and actually the honor of knowing you now for a few years. And initially, it was during the angel discussions, kind of you're really starting up, taking a little bit of seed money at the beginning, and then evolving to this autonomous navigation within warehouses through the COVID pandemic and now coming out of it. Can you comment on, I guess there's two-part question. The first is, how did you maintain your footing and your momentum during the pandemic? And then second, how has it evolved your story? And maybe that's a lesson for someone out there that has to take their value proposition and keep it current.
Absolutely. So that's it was a challenging time for sure. The pandemic, when it hit, in the investment community, it was called the nuclear winter of sales. Industries stopped spending money for a while, so there was about 6 months of real, radio silence from customers because they were trying to figure out their own situation. What we had to our advantage is that we are agile, we're a startup, we are nimble, so we can adapt to changing situations pretty rapidly. Just before COVID hit, we had started picking up a lot of bigger orders. So we had a rich customer pipeline and orders to fulfill. So we went through with that. And in that time frame, while the industry and the broader market was trying to figure itself out, trends started to emerge. That supply chain is the big thing. We had 2030 levels of demand with infrastructure that was, I dare say, at 2010 levels. And these businesses, these warehouses and factories were now under immense pressure. If you think about it, they need more people to fulfill higher order volume. At the same time, not enough people are able to come into work. So it created the perfect storm for them to start thinking about digitization, automation. So coming out of COVID, it's actually really good for somebody like us because the market's primed for what we are offering.
How did you evolve your story? Because quality checklists, for example, we first started talking, weren't on your radar.
Right.
And yet now that's one of the first things you talk about. Is it, how's the value proposition evolved? And maybe what's a lesson that someone else can take whenever they have to think about their own value proposition and keeping it current?
So when you start a company, you first go with a certain thesis in mind and you take it to the market. And you soon realize that in some places your thesis is right, and in other places it doesn't really match what the market is looking for immediately. So when we went out with autonomous vehicles, we realized that there was a lot of problems much simpler or at a much lower level than autonomous vehicles that the customers needed to be solved. Let's take an example, quality checklist. So OSHA says, which it's a mandatory law, that every vehicle, every industrial vehicle that is to be operated must be inspected visually and for safe operation by the operator before taking it out into the warehouse or into the field. What happens is that in a typical warehouse, it's already being done on paper. And what happens is that the paper either gets lost or doesn't get reported, or the operator will not do it throughout the week and then come in on Friday, print 5 sheets of paper, fill it out and give it. And then management spends about an hour a day trying to turn that paper into an Excel sheet. So it may sound strange to somebody, listening to this podcast that, hey, in 2020, people are using paper inspections and haven't digitized it, but that's true. So we had customers coming to us and saying, hey, do you have digital checklists? We were like, but we came to talk to you about autonomous vehicles. They're like, but no. Can I get digital checklists? So that's what prompted us to get into that. And we saw a huge opportunity because now that becomes kind of like a gateway product to our customers. And it helped us expand our, what we call the ideal customer profile, expand our market reach by offering something at a much lower price point and enabled us to generate revenue to feed the long-term vision of the company.
Well, it's a separate discussion. We'll follow up. Part of the Knowledge Institute, we are always looking for research and data. And you are probably now privy to a wonderful repository of information about what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
Those checklists, as you digitize them, especially if you manage them on behalf of clients, you have that learning, that knowledge. It's interesting with sales, people buy hope of gain or fear of loss. Of course, the gain is more revenue or less cost. The avoidance of loss is with regulation. You mentioned OSHA. So can you comment on how that plays into your business plan, or at least your go-to-market for a particular offering?
Absolutely, Jeff. And you actually put it in very succinct terms. It's, in sales, they say that it's greed or fear that sells. So it's either preventing loss or making more money. So preventing loss, let's talk about that. OSHA says that 1 in 6 workplace deaths involves a forklift. And actually missing forklift inspections is one of the top 5 OSHA forklift violations. Now, across the industry, there's about 96,000 accidents in North America. And out of that, 35,000 involve serious injuries. And when we've talked to our customers, we've learned things like, we're spending $100,000 a year just repairing damages to our facilities caused by these industrial vehicles. OSHA will even fine a factory or a warehouse $10,000 if they find a missing inspection. That's $10,000 per piece of equipment. So if they have 100 vehicles in that facility, you can imagine they're paying $1 million in fines. It's rare, but it has happened. So how are we helping our customers, and what does that mean for us in terms of go-to-market? So what we enable our customers to do is, first of all, not rely on paper, go digital entirely for their inspections and compliance processes. It makes everybody's life easier. The operations manager, the warehouse manager, all they need to do is click one button to generate an OSHA report and send it to the inspector, instead of having to go run around, look for that piece of paper. And if it's not found, you'll get fined. It's wonderful for the maintenance person, because now here comes the saving money part. If you find out about a failed inspection, which could mean a mechanical failure or an electrical failure on a vehicle, and you find out about that as soon as it happens, you can repair it. Versus when it gets extremely broken down or too bad to fix. So it's things like that that add up. So what we did is, using this information from our customers, we worked out a go-to-market plan. We realized that it's really 3 kinds of people in any big organization that end up working with us. It's the people in operations, the people who run the facilities, the people in environment, health and safety, and the people in engineering/innovation. The people in operations control the money. They have the biggest budgets. And so we say that these are the decision makers. They have to get the value as soon as possible. And then there's the safety people who act as the champions. They're always out there looking for new ways to improve safety. They may not have the biggest budgets, but they influence the business. And if an accident happens, their job is on the line. So they're incentivized to make sure an accident never happens. So what we ended up doing is, using this information, we created a go-to-market plan where we target the safety people and we educate them on what we call a 5-step strategy to forklift safety. And it's a purely education-based approach. And from that, we work our way backwards to, okay, what strategy works for you? What's your forklift safety score? What are the gaps in your current processes? And then we bring in the operations people, because the operations people can just look at the gaps and say, yes, that's my problem. Can you fix it? And that turns into a sale. So that's how we've kind of worked out our go-to-market strategy and our sales plan.
Digging a little deeper, I think supply chain has emerged, I think it's safe to say, from the shadows, where before it was very invisible. People focus on the product, maybe the money or the customer experience. In that supply chain set of processes or flows, what about the warehouse? And what about that critical link of making sure goods that come in and go out? Do you see enough visibility there? And what steps are you taking to raise that visibility to more executives?
So those are some of the things that we're looking to get into. There's things like inventory counting. So in a warehouse is like a city in and of itself. right? We've been into warehouses that are 2 million square feet that operate 24 by 7, 365 days a year. And there's, there could be 200 or 300 vehicles operating at any point in that one building. So what's happening is constantly trucks are coming in, unloading goods. Those goods are being, unloaded from the truck using a forklift and then putting into some kind of a rack or storage area. And then an order comes in, the warehouse management system figures out, okay, which operator should get that order. That operator drives a vehicle and takes that order out and gives it out. The kind of problems these warehouses face is a lot of time inventory does not get put in the right place. Lost inventory is a multi-billion-dollar a year problem. So things that we are looking to get into is how do we use computer vision to get insights into where, by scanning barcodes, where that inventory is, and then telling the shift manager or the operations manager or the decision makers on a day-to-day basis, hey, this inventory is actually not supposed to be here in rack A, it should be in rack B. Today, we are already telling these managers and decision makers, how many times did a industrial vehicle get close to a pedestrian and almost have a near miss? How many times did they actually hit something and damage something? How many failed inspections are there? Why did that inspection fail? And we can then inform the right person with the right piece of information to either take right maintenance action, to take corrective coaching for an operator who's driving very dangerously, or maybe, hey, somebody needs a drug test because they're having too many impacts today. They're hitting things. What's wrong? We can do all of that today.
Well, it looks like, based upon my research and understanding your business, you've almost have a bifurcated or dual level approach to things. You've got the checklists and things that are very important. It's about being connected and digitizing. It's a little more rules based.
Right.
And then you've got the rocket science, the AI, the really advanced types of things. We talked about the former for a bit. Let's get into the secondary. First of all, can you demystify what it means to have artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles running around a warehouse? What does it mean for the average professional who has heard these terms but doesn't quite know what they mean?
Absolutely. So AI is a broad term, right? And it's been used to define a lot of different things. But in the context of a warehouse or even a factory, and when we talk about industrial mobility, industrial vehicles, what we're really talking about is a vehicle that has the ability to drive without an operator in it, that has the ability to get an instruction. For example, go to location A, pick up pallet number 565, and take it to location B, and then go do something else. So an AI-driven autonomous vehicle in a warehouse should be able to understand an instruction, go to that place without somebody telling it how to get there. So there has been warehouse automation and factory automation since the 60s, since the 50s. There actually have been automated forklifts in the market for a long time. The problem was that they needed some kind of guiding tapes or guiding wires or some kind of external system to actually tell them how to go from point A to point B. Today, we have the ability to take a vehicle into any warehouse, drive it around the warehouse and build a map of that facility. And then the vehicle can itself figure out how to go from point A to point B. That's the game changer. That's what enables these decision makers, the warehouse managers, to be hands-free, to not have to constantly monitor and babysit the system.
How much of an improvement or how much of an edge is it that you can control the environment? Like you've got a roof or a ceiling and you've got fixed points as compared to throwing one of these forklifts out on a highway or open road?
Right. That's an interesting way to put it. So in the open environment, Jeff, an autonomous vehicle has to deal with rain, snow, kids running into the street, somebody's dog running out of their house and coming onto the street, even wild animals. There are videos of self-driving vehicles on YouTube that have to deal with wild animals just coming onto the road. In a warehouse or in a factory, there's none of that. The good thing is that the people who work in a warehouse or factory can be trained to coexist and cooperate with the automated equipment. In a warehouse, there can be definitely well-defined pathways for the vehicles to travel and for people to walk on, for automated vehicles to go on and non-automated vehicles to go on. So those are a lot of good things that can be done. But the challenge is that as soon as you put non-automated things in the same environment as automated things, so you know what I'm getting at. As soon as you put people in the same environment as automated vehicles, there's things as there's potential for things to go wrong. People don't always follow rules. People may want to do horseplay and jump in front of the vehicle to see if it stops. They may not even look where they're going or not walk in the pedestrian walkways. So that's why, although this environment is definitely more structured and there's less environmental issues like extreme sunlight or rain or snow, you're still dealing with people. And whenever you're dealing with people, you cannot forego safety. So safety comes first.
Yeah, I'd imagine that little different legal environment as well,
Right.
with that. Dig a little deeper in and not divulging proprietary information, but how does how do these vehicles actually navigate, and can you talk about the name of the algorithm, or the type of problem solving, or maybe the challenges you've had to overcome to even get it to this level of functionality?
Absolutely. One of the things that I really love to talk about. So without going into proprietary details, let's break down autonomous navigation into three things, right? The first thing is the definition of a task. Like, what is a task? So that tells the vehicle what to do. The second thing is, where am I? Right? What does the world look like and where am I? And the third thing is, how do I get there? So I won't talk about the first part because that's not really the robotics and navigation part. That actually is a combination of the robot taking instructions, using some kind of software API, and talking to a warehouse management system. Let's talk about the two next parts. So the first part is, where am I? And the second part is, how do I get there? So where am I comes from an algorithm called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. So as the acronym goes, simultaneously knowing where I am and building a map of the environment. How does that work? We typically take a combination of lasers, LiDAR, and cameras and fuse that information with a lot of information that comes from the vehicle's own wheels, like how fast are the wheels turning, what is the steering angle. It's called odometry information. And all this information, because there is no GPS inside a warehouse. We get asked this question a lot of times from customers, like, hey, why don't you just put GPS? Well, there's no GPS inside a building. And even if you did put GPS accuracy is like in the range of meters, 2 to 5 meters. But what you need in a warehouse is centimeter level accuracy, because you need to actually go and pick up pallets and drop them from point A to point B. So what this software does is it takes this laser data, so it's pinging the walls, pinging the racks, and measuring the distances. So it builds a model of what the warehouse looks like. Then it uses the camera to take some pictures and kind of store that information and says, okay, putting it in rudimentary terms, if I see this stop sign and the wall is 5 meters to my right, then I must be here, right? And what it does is it keeps storing that information as you're driving around the facility and then ties it all together. And when it ties it all together, it becomes a map. So once you've done the mapping part and then you're driving inside that map, all the system is doing is localizing to that pre-existing map. So that's called SLAM. The next part is, how do I get there? So that's motion planning. So motion planning can be broken into two parts again. So first part is actually creating the plan. And the second part is executing the plan. So let's think about like this, Jeff. If you're going from Dallas to Austin, the task is, I need to go from Dallas to Austin. Now, the mapping is taken care of because you have Google Maps. So all you need to do is punch your destination in Google Maps, and Google Maps creates a plan for you. And it tells you, hey, take exit 565, take I-35 south, and blah, blah, blah. But then you are the one who's actually taking the decision of how much to accelerate, how much to brake, whether to change lane or not. That's called the actual control or the execution of the plan. So let's talk about motion planning. What happens in that motion planning is that this robot is actually using the map. It's trying to figure out what parts of the map can I use? Like, what's the open space? If the user wants to tell the robot, like, hey, this part of the map is a no-go area. Maybe that's where the lunch break area is. This is where the restrooms are. Don't go there. So the robot can use that information to kind of join the dots, and just like Google Maps, create a local, a plan in the warehouse. And then there's a lot of software in the robot that actually takes that plan and says, okay, if I am at some, mathematically speaking, XY coordinate, and the plan says go to some other XY coordinate, I need to turn my steering wheel to the right 10 degrees and accelerate to, 3 miles per hour, and so on and so forth. So that's what's happening constantly of about, 10 to 20 times a second.
And beyond that, there's probably a lot of mathematical notations and Greek symbols we won't go into.
Yes, there's a lot of math into
that. It's interesting. It's the ultimate black box, that there's a lot going on behind the scenes that maybe beyond a lot of folks. And yet, if you don't have enough of a view into it, nobody will trust it. So It's an interesting dichotomy you go through. Putting your CEO hat on for a moment, as you take the company from where you are today with customers and pipeline and growth, you're actually, some respects, crossing the chasm. You're trying to go to that next level where it's widespread adoption and scale. What are the challenges as a business leader that you're thinking about and trying to overcome so that your company can go to that next level?
That's a great question, Jeff. So as a business leader, you're always trying to balance growth with growth comes from, serving more customers or serving existing customers more deeply, to the needs of your team and product development, to the needs of your R&D goals, to your vision. So you're trying to tie all of that together. At the end of the day, you have one problem always. It's limited resources. That limited resources can be your people, can be the money in the bank, or can be limitation of ideas or limitation of knowledge, right? Which again comes down to people. So as we grow a business, cross that, valley of death and grow into that next growth phase of the company, the things that I always is, okay, what kind of capital are we going to raise, and whom are we going to raise it from? And what is the intended purpose of that capital? What is that next set of customers that I'm going to go to? Because some customers, even though they have a need, sometimes it's bad for the company to take those customers on. So how do you differentiate between the good and the bad customers? Because once you take on a bad customer, you can go down a downward spiral to build something that doesn't really scale. So who is the right customer? Who is the right investor? Once I have this capital, what is the right way to execute it? And because at the end of the day, we're not just solving problems here. We're trying to, dare I say it, take humanity to the next level. In a way, take the industry to the next level. So there's a vision. So how do you stay true to the vision? Build that unique technology. At the same time, practically speaking, stay within budgets, hire the right people, and make that all work. Those are, it's everything is on a business leader's mind at all time. Limited resources, I would say, is the one thing that you're always kind of trying to juggle and manage and massage.
Got it. Along the same vein, but maybe a little different angle here. Sustainability, the environment, in general, social and governance as well. They aren't just an interesting topic now. They are on the board agenda for these major companies you're trying to work with. And you've got a role to play, because EHS, you get safety, you've got employee welfare. And of course, if you're more efficient with resources, then maybe there's a energy play as well. Knowing what you know about ESG, Paris Accords, greenhouse gas emissions, decarbonization, any role, since you mentioned vision and helping humanity go to the next level, what's the role that SIERA.AI and maybe AI in general can play in doing that?
So Jeff, even on our website, the first thing we say is, we're here to free humans from dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs, right? Dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs. Now, ESG is definitely a focus area for almost all corporates. Here's an interesting tidbit of information. Toyota Industries shut down production of one of its most profitable lines of industrial vehicles. Those are internal combustion engine forklifts, because the EPA did not approve their engines. They had to halt production and halt sales of those vehicles in North America in May 2021. So it having a real business impact businesses that are serving, the vendors that are building these pieces of equipment, because the customers at the other end are saying, hey, I don't want a vehicle that's pumping out noxious gases inside my warehouse where my people are breathing and working 24/7 a day. We want to go electric, and it's actually cheaper for them to go electric because less maintenance, right? So yes, in that transition from gas guzzling, from petrochemical based to electric based, lithium ion, hydrogen fuel cell, solar energy, AI will play a huge role. How do you optimize the driving patterns of a vehicle so that it's not wasting the limited battery power it has? You can actually optimize acceleration and deceleration to keep the battery at optimum charge. Those are things that AI can do. You can also monitor the health of a battery and tell the people who maintain the fleet that this battery is now due replacement, because what you end up doing is, if you're not using the battery or disposing of the battery at the right time, you're actually losing charge frequently. So you're wasting electricity bills charging that piece of equipment, and then it's not giving you the productivity that you need. Now, coming to safety, people safety, this is a huge one. COVID made people realize that although they need automation, the kind of automations that they need don't exist today. The technology isn't there yet for a lot of the automations that people hope to achieve. So people are extremely important. And what business leaders are now realizing is that AI's role in Industry 4.0 is to enable people to become smarter and more efficient and safer in their workplace, right? Like we like to say is in a little, funny way, we make sure that our customers don't fork it up. And why is that? We make sure that the people who come into work go out the same way they came in, because labor pools are shrinking. Material handling and logistics are some of the highest growing, job markets in the US. As you know, it's where Amazon is famous for hiring 200,000 warehouse workers in one shot, right? So with the shrinking labor pool and accidents and injuries going up because you've got more young people, untrained people who need to be brought in quickly as temporary workers, trained and put on the job, they're causing accidents, they're getting injured. How do you make them smarter, more productive, more safe, more efficient, and get your work done? Right? That's where SIERA.AI steps in. So we combine that AI with the people, make them smarter. And then looking at the data, we can tell our customers, hey, this is where you can deploy full automation and remove the people, because this is where it makes most business sense and you have the return on investment.
Got it. One tech question here, or maybe future forecasting question. What is the coolest piece of technology or thing you see maybe coming in a couple of years around the corner?
Let's talk about it in the context of industrial vehicles. And I think computer vision to me is one of the most coolest innovations. Now, it's not new, but what's going to happen is that in the next couple of years, compute is going to get so cheap and vision sensors are going to get so powerful that I believe that we should be able to do fully autonomous driving without having to rely on any kind of LiDARs, any kind of sensors that are expensive or cumbersome, or sonar, things like sonar and radar, and purely use vision and drive a vehicle like a human would by using the power of edge computing, edge AI, combined with the cloud. And that's where actually I missed one key piece of information, 5G. 5G is going to come to Industry 4.0 much before consumers start to adopt it. I believe 5G is going to play a huge role in digitizing these workplaces, because they don't have, we've gone into facilities where there's difficulty getting Wi-Fi, but once you put small cell technology in 5G, you can enable billions of edge devices to instantly communicate with the cloud, transfer intelligence and share intelligence across the network, and become smarter as a collective swarm. And that to me is very exciting.
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice. And I think that the last mile or the last few yards on a factory floor is a really exciting place, I think, for these things to manifest themselves. Respecting your time, should bring this together to a close. What are the three things that you might convey to a business leader who's thinking about industrial automation, industrial mobility, and maybe taking steps towards automation or autonomous navigation?
Absolutely. So when talking to a business leader, I like to always put things into three buckets: why, what, and how, right? So let's talk about why, what, and how from the perspective of industrial operations. Why are you looking at automation? Is it because you have a shortage of people? Or is it because you think people are too expensive? Because when you define the problem clearly, you ask the right question, then you can define the solution. So you have to start with the why, right? So when we talk to our customers, for example, we ask them, hey, why are you talking to Sierra.AI? We've heard things like, oh, well, we're tired of paper being littered across our warehouse floor. Or we're tired of, forklifts driving into racks and damaging millions of dollars of customer product. That's why we're coming and talking to you. Now, once you define the why you're looking into automation, why you're looking into digitization, then define the what. What can you do? Maybe you are only looking for digitization, moving to the cloud, because that's where you're not even in the cloud. You may be using on-premise servers. What happens is a lot of these companies, they can get to the why, but when it comes from jumping from the why to the what to the how, they get lost in what to do because they get confused. There's so many options there. And the bigger the corporate, the more confused they are about what they should be doing because there's so many stakeholders. So what I recommend to business leaders is when you come to the what part, don't have one what. Define bets that you can take in your business because you have a clear vision of what problem you're trying to solve, why you're doing this. What can you do to solve this problem? You may not know all the answers today. So define bets, take strategic bets. And it's not, and in Jeff Bezos' own words, don't take, bet the company bets. Don't bet your entire company, but take small bets, but take lots of bets and iterate and learn. And as you learn from these bets and you understand what works and what doesn't, you can get a clear picture and understanding of how to implement to get the what you need to answer the why. So at the end of the day, my 2 cents to business leaders is take bets. Don't be shy from taking bets and move fast.
I think that speed element is not just to be agile, but also increases resilience because you can make lots of course corrections. Yeah,
right.
Great advice. Saurav, what resources do you recommend for people to go deeper in these areas?
I would say CB Insights publishes a lot of good analyst reports on everything to do with mobility to warehousing and supply chain. I would say if you're particularly in supply chain, manufacturing, and warehousing, look at CBRE's reports on real estate trends in warehousing. If you're into industrial vehicle equipment, there's an industry group called MHI, Material Handling International. That's a very good industry group to go after. And at the end of the day, you can always visit Sierra.AI at www.Sierra.AI, and we can tell you all about it.
Great. And how can people find you online?
So we're active on LinkedIn, on social media, on our website. So the best place to find us is to go to our website, www.Sierra, that's SIERA.AI, and download our 5-step strategy guide. That's a good place to start to learn about how we think about industrial mobility. And from there on, we can have a conversation.
Great. And everyone, you can find details on everything that Saurav said and more on our show notes and transcripts at infosys.com/IKI in our podcast section. Saurav, thank you so much for a great, thought-provoking, and highly interesting discussion.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Everyone, you've been listening to the Knowledge Institute, where we talk with startup leaders, deconstruct main ideas, and share their insights. Thanks to our producers, Catherine Burdett, Christine Calhoun, and Dylan Cosper. Until next time, keep learning, keep sharing.